So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily MCQ Practice. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs through 4 to 5 MCQs. Now, if you're following this lecture series for quite some time, you know what we do in this lecture series. But those of you who have joined us with this lecture, this is your first lecture. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, well, we cover a particular day's newspaper through 4 to 5 MCQs, and we hope that you get two major benefits out of this lecture series. Number one, well, your current affairs for the day would get covered. If you missed out on that day's current affairs, if you didn't miss out, then your current affairs would get revised. The other benefit is that you'll get the much needed MCQ practice. This MCQ practice is very important. Why? Because without this MCQ practice, you won't be able to cross your prelims examination next year. And the road to your prelims examination next year begins now. It starts from today. Okay? So make sure you cover 4 to 5 MCQs from current affairs alone daily with me on this lecture series. And by the time you're ready with your prelims examination next year, you would have covered more than 1,000 MCQs. And it all starts with this small habit of giving to me 10 minutes of your time daily by covering this lecture series, by covering this lecture. So if you follow this lecture, if you cover 4 to 5 MCQs daily with me, then by the end of next year, not by the end of next year, by the time you're ready for your prelims examination, more than 1,000 MCQs from current affairs alone. I'm not talking about static subjects like polity, history, geography. I'm talking about just current affairs. From current affairs alone, you would have practiced more than 1,000 MCQs. 10 minutes daily, and that would amount to more than 1,000 MCQs from current affairs. So make this lecture series a part of your daily routine. Follow this regularly. All right? Okay. Now let's straight to question number 1. Consider the following statements regarding Antarctica's deep winter heat wave. Strengthening of polar vortex causes heat wave-like conditions in the polar regions. The albedo effect of polar ice sheets helps in cooling Earth. Persistent heat wave-like conditions in Antarctica will impact global ocean circulation, which will accentuate global warming. Okay. Now, recently, Antarctica has been facing heat wave-like conditions which threaten the ice sheets of Antarctica. And if all these ice sheets were to melt, well, then it would lead to global sea level rise, which would displace or which would submerge most of the coastal cities of the world. Okay. Plus, if these ice sheets melt, then it would also impact global ocean circulation. Basically, the surface water, on as far as oceans are concerned, the surface water on the surface, it is quite dense. So that is why it sinks down. But before it sinks down, it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, heat from the atmosphere. Okay? And then it sinks down. New water comes to the surface. It again absorbs CO2 and heat and it pushes it down. So, through this, the global temperatures are maintained. But if Antarctica's ice sheets were to melt, then this surface water would become less dense. It won't sink down and it won't absorb that much CO2 and heat from the atmosphere. That would lead to global warming or more global warming. Okay? So persistent heat wave like conditions in Antarctica will impact global ocean circulation and which will impact or accentuate global warming. This is correct. Now, why Antarctica is facing heat wave like conditions? Well, let's talk about both polar regions, Antarctica as well as Arctic. Okay. Now, both in Antarctica and in Arctic regions, heat wave conditions develop when their atmosphere has polar vortex. Okay. In the upper atmosphere of both the polar regions, there is this thing called polar vortex. If you want to understand polar vortex in detail, we'll follow our geography lectures. So when this polar vortex weakens, then heat wave-like conditions persist. When this polar vortex is strong, well, then these areas are cold. Okay. Now, because of weakening of polar vortex, heat wave-like conditions develop. Okay. So it's not strengthening, weakening. Now, ice sheets also perform one more function which helps in cooling the earth. Ice sheets are white in color, and white colors have albedo effect. They reflect sun's rays, keeping the planet cool. So, albedo effect of polar ice sheets helps in cooling earth. This is also correct. Only two statements are correct. The answer is B. All right. Question number 2. Which of the following statements are correct regarding India's refugee policy? It is in line with UN Convention on Status of Refugees. Foreigners Act and Indian Passport Act deals with illegal immigrants in India. There are nearly 3 lakh people in India categorized as refugees. Okay. Now, which of the above statements are correct? Now, listen to me. India has no refugee policy. There is an international law with respect to refugees, which is known as UN Convention on Status of Refugees, but India has neither signed it nor ratified it. So India is not a signatory to this convention, and India has no law with respect to refugees. Okay, so first statement is false. Now, if there is an illegal immigrant in India, well, to deal with those illegal immigrants, India has two laws: Foreigners Act and Indian Passport Act. That's absolutely correct. Now, despite having no law with respect to refugees, India has been a friendly country for refugees. India has given refuge to many people who ran away from their countries. There are around 3 lakh people in India who are categorized as refugees. These include Tibetans, Sri Lankan Tamils, okay, Chakma refugees from Bangladesh. These were Buddhist refugees. So there are many refugees in India. But India did not give refugee status to Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar, and India called them as illegal immigrants. That is also true. But India hosts a lot of refugees. So this is correct. 2 and 3 are correct. Okay. Question number 3. Consider the following statements regarding India's monetary policy stance. Now, it is decided by Monetary Policy Committee, which is chaired by RBI Governor. The recent stance of withdrawal of accommodation indicates reduction of repo rate. Accommodative monetary policy stance is generally adopted to reduce inflation. Which of the above statements is correct? Now look, what is monetary policy stance? Well, monetary policy stance is India's position towards its money supply. Okay, whenever India wants to increase its money supply, it makes its stance as accommodative. Whenever India wants to decrease money supply, well, it makes its stance tight or withdrawal of accommodation. Okay. Now, to increase money supply for accommodative monetary policy stance, generally RBI reduces repo rate. And to make your monetary policy stance tight or withdrawal of accommodation, RBI either increases repo rate or keeps it constant, but never reduces it. Okay, make sense? Now, these decisions are taken by Monetary Policy Committee, which is a committee of RBI. Monetary Policy Committee is a 6-member committee. 3 members are from RBI. 3 members are appointed by Government of India. And its chairman is RBI Governor. So, first statement is correct. The recent stance of withdrawal of accommodation indicates reduction of repo rate. No. When you are following withdrawal of accommodation, repo rate is either increased or kept constant. Okay. Accommodative monetary policy stance is generally adopted to reduce inflation. No. In fact, if you follow accommodative monetary policy stance, then money supply gets increased, and when money supply is high, it puts upward pressure on inflation. So generally, accommodative monetary policy stance increases inflation. Okay, so the answer to this question would be only one. And last, consider the following statements regarding WAK property. It is a personal property donated for religious or charitable purposes. The ownership of this property lies with Waqf Board. As per the Waqf Act 1995, any dispute regarding Waqf property shall be decided by Waqf tribunal appointed by the state. So basically, in Islam, if any person wants to donate his or her property, religious or charitable purposes, that property is designated as Waqf property. Okay, so first statement is correct. Now, generally, the ownership of this property is generally deemed to be with God. Okay, but this property is managed by Waqf Board. Okay, ownership lies with the God legally also, but management is with Waqf Board. So this statement is false. Now, what are the rules and regulations or laws regarding Waqf property or management of Waqf property? For that, there is Waqf Act 1995. And if there is any dispute regarding the ownership of the property in question, okay, then the matter shall be taken to Waqf tribunal, which will be appointed by state government. So this is also correct. 1 and 3 are correct. The correct answer to this question would be C. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I hope it added value to your preparation. I'm sure it added value to your preparation if you watch this lecture with sincerity. And please continue to watch this lectures with sincerity because it will be really helpful to you. It might not seem right now. You might think that it's just 4 to 5 MCQ. How much of a difference would it make in my prelims preparation? But cumulatively, in more than 300 days, cumulatively, it will make a lot of difference. Right now, it might seem just 10 minutes of your day, but cumulatively, it will amount to 9,000, I'm sorry, 300 days. Okay, and 300 days would amount to 3,000 minutes. So 3,000 minutes of current affairs preparation through MCQs is more than enough. So please be consistent with it. All right. On that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much, everyone.